Great. Before we go on, I just wanted to remind folks that there is a chat function you have there on Zoom. If you open your chat window down at the bottom of the screen there, you can chat with the other folks who are listening in today. If you do that, there's a little drop down at the bottom of the chat window. Make sure that's set to all panelists and attendees so everyone can see it. There's also a Q&A window which you can open up also along the bottom of the screen there. And if you do have any questions for me or for Nadira, please put them in the Q&A queue rather than the chat queue, because I may not see them in the chat queue. So obviously you had to ingest an enormous amount of box office data to be able to do this, particularly by territory. That must have. So where did you get all that data? Just from public sources, or
everywhere, everywhere, Paul. Online, we pretty much scraped everything that you can find online, but also we received a lot of data from companies that we worked with. Sometimes you end up working with a company that's actually very open to sharing data, to sharing scripts. I remember one of the early distributing companies that we worked with shared a Dropbox with us that had about, I think, close to 6,000 scripts. So we get information, we get data from the companies that we work with. And of course, we scrape our own data. And that all leads to a data set of 30,000 scripts.
And so for sort of subjective parameters like likability, so you had humans assigning those tags, I guess, for lack of a better term, to them. How did you, tell me about that process? How did you define likability in order to put a number on it?
Well, good question. Basically, I remember it was summertime and we brought in film students. We brought in like a large group of film students and asked them to based on a scale. So I remember our CTO, putting together a scale, and we asked them to rate the likability of characters in a script. And the thing was, in order to actually agree that a certain character is likable, we had to have an internal agreement rate of 75%, meaning that 75%, at least 75% of that group, all had to say, this is a character that we find likable. So this is how we actually started working on the likability feature.
So, so in this case, the writer uploaded this script. Does the writer pay for that, or how does that work?
No, well, basically, the longer roadmap for ScriptBook was basically we wanted to in the future, with future I mean next year, we wanted to have an ecosystem, really democratize this space and build an ecosystem that's accessible to everybody. But with the whole Corona crisis happening, we were thinking about, okay, how can we pay it forward? And literally we just kind of had a quick brainstorm over Zoom and thought, okay, let's open up the software to independent screenwriters, let them use the software, upload their material, use it to their own benefit. And in the meantime, we'll set up partnerships with companies so that companies can actually come and source validated content. So this actually was all driven or put in a higher speed because of the Corona crisis. And this is what you see. We call it the Corona script marketplace, but just FYI, it's not because of Corona. It was meant to roll out next year, but because of Corona, we just thought to release a beta version.
So the idea here is to create essentially a marketplace where writers can have scripts validated, evaluated.
Basically, when we started with the company, our focus was analyze and predict. And when we were doing the whole proof of concepts, you know, and with companies and hearing what the opinions are, you always have resistance within the field, within the industry, because again, Hollywood isn't keen on technological tools. But the thing is, for us,
they're getting a little better.
It's getting far better than it used to be, for sure, for sure. You have actually, I always say there is a dualistic nature. You have really a part of the industry that's very welcoming to anything that's innovative, that they want to try it out, they want to use it. And then you also have, you know, a group that really prefers to stay traditional in their approaches. But for me personally, I actually remember having a conversation with a futurist of one of the large companies in LA at a conference. And I was speaking with him and I asking him, how can I overcome resistance? Because it's so hard, for example, to get company X or Y sign up, and how do I go about? And this man, this futurist, gave me some really good advice. And he said, you have to beat them at their own game. So that made me really think about what does he mean with beat them at their own game. I remember after that, I came back and I spoke to my team. I said, okay, we have built a validation platform driven by AI, and it's time now to go to phase 2, which is literally, it's co-create. You know, we want not just analyze and predict, we want our AI to be able to co-create as well. And this is another part of ScriptBook, but we,
Okay.
this is another part of ScriptBook, but basically we wanted to co-create as well. So that was the birth actually of Deep Story. We just thought, okay, we spent years learning about stories, the structure of stories, and now we have enough expertise to use that and use the features that we built and use them into an automated story generator. So basically a generator.
Yeah, we'll get to that, but before we do, when we spoke earlier, you mentioned that since the COVID-19 situation hit us all, you've actually gotten interest or inquiries from I guess production companies primarily, or financiers, asking about whether you could incorporate parameters relevant to trying to produce films during COVID-19 into your analysis. Can you, what does that mean exactly? What is a COVID-safe film script mean?
Well, it's yeah, it was actually one of a question that came from a number of companies that reached out to us, asking, in these Corona times, would technology help in spotting projects that would be that they could produce in Corona times? And basically, if we were able to build some sort of a COVID-free filter in our analysis, it's a question that came from a number of companies. I think it's everything has changed, and if you want to resume production, you need to be insured. I think insurance companies are probably a difficult topic right now because of the whole COVID thing. And I think it's a legit question, though. I think a lot of companies, they want to resume production, but they want to focus as well on projects that won't be a big liability. So we have some companies sending us a list of for example, metrics that would make a certain project COVID safe and COVID free. And we're definitely looking into that. I mean, if we can help out in any way, we will do that, of course. But it's definitely something that I think the first call that we got was about 2 to 3 weeks ago. So I think it's going to be an important topic for the next 2 years, that companies will focus on projects that they can actually produce in these times.
And get insured, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's becoming a rather huge issue within the industry, particularly independent films. I mean, the big studios are able to get insurance or insure themselves, but any independent production has to be able to insure the production before anyone would finance it. So. So yeah, that's definitely a big issue. So let's talk a little bit more about AI, AI's role broadly in the creative process. You're obviously analyzing a creative product, a script, and evaluating it against essentially numeric parameters. What do you think? How do you respond to folks who say AI is sort of the opposite of creativity, or could harm in some way the creative process of filmmaking or any other creative endeavor?
Mm-hmm. Of course, I hear their concerns. I hear their concerns for sure, because they have this fear that technology will probably, affect creativity, or will probably single out only those projects that are commercially viable and have no artistic value. But that's not the case. It's even I think by using AI, you actually are enhancing creativity, because the AI, as we've seen throughout the whole proof of concept that we did in the past years, it actually ranks artistic projects much higher than the as we call it, the big blockbusters. So I would definitely, I keep saying this in every talk that I do, that AI will not affect creativity. It's not going to affect creativity, because I see what kind of project our system actually handpicks, literally, and there are always projects that you would say, oh, I can't believe this is actually something that an AI selected. It really goes to stories that have an artistic value, that have a strong storyline as well. So it's definitely criticism that we get, and it's a concern with a lot of people. But I will always answer in the same way, that it will enhance creativity and not jeopardize it.
In fact, you've built another piece in ScriptBook called Deep Story, I believe, that actually sort of is intended to be a creative engine in its own right. Can you tell us a little bit about Deep Story?
Of course. I think earlier I mentioned quickly Deep Story. The thing is, when we built our first product, the Analyze and Predict, I think we had a lot of expertise, and we wanted to use it into something that would benefit everybody who actually creates stories. For us, we see it as a co-creator, that or let's say it's a tool in the writer's toolkit. What Deep Story does, you have to think of this. I'm a writer, I'm starting from scratch. I wrote 2 lines, I have a writer's block, and I need inspiration. And an engine like this, like Deep Story, is able to actually read whatever a writer has written, take that into context, and generate the next sentence or the next scenes, or give just ideas on storyline. It really is made to help creatives. There is a war on content, and we believe by adding AI as a co-writer, this war on content will probably no longer exist, because you will have a lot of supply. It really is meant to bring out the creativity in humans, to collaborate with an AI and let them develop stories that probably wouldn't have existed without an AI.
We're kind of running out of time here, but could you quickly show us what that actually would mean?
Yeah, Sure. Let me quickly share my screen. All right. This is, for example, this is just an alpha phase. So this is the interface that we use internally. It's not available on the internet or anything. But basically what it does, you can actually start from scratch and say, I want to generate an action film, for example, or rated. You can set in the budget. And you can actually say, I want to generate something that is somewhat like Superbad. And you can choose your characters. You can say, I want the fingerprints of the characters from Superbad. And then when you go to script, you can actually generate either a single sentence like this, or you can just hit play and say, I want to generate a full scene. And this is what the engine will do. It will generate a full scene. And that's just on a side note, AI-generated content feels as if it's written by a machine. It's not human. So it is very entertaining. People will laugh, but it is generated by a machine. So for us at this point, we want to make sure that the deep story engine becomes more consistent in its writing. And people can actually edit if a scene is generated and you don't like, for example, certain sentences, you can edit them. You can work with whatever has been generated by the generator. I think the scene is almost coming to an end. There you go. And you can actually.
Very cool.
There you go.
Okay, so we're coming up on time here. We do have a little audience poll that I'm going to put up to give folks who are watching a chance to weigh in on some of these, including, you know, AI's role in creativity. Can everyone see the audience poll? Can you see it there? Nadira, are you seeing it?
Yes, I can see it. Yes.
Okay, you can see it. So other folks can probably see it too. We do have a bunch of questions here. Let me get to that. And anyone who may have posted a question in the chat stream, feel free to repost it in the Q&A stream. We're more likely to get to it there. Beverly Sheet. If when the use of AI becomes more widespread, is there a risk that script writers learning, this is an interesting question, learning to game the system, as it were, and tailoring their scripts for AI preferences? Is that an issue that that you've been asked about?
It's a good question. I think we're not there yet. Basically she's asking whether we can cheat on the AI, you know, by knowing what the preferences are, and then you will cheat the system. It would be hard. It's a difficult question because we're not there yet. So we need to be further in the process in order to know whether this will be possible or not. At this point, I would say no, because the variables that are taken into account are just way too high. I mean, the parameters taken into account are way too high. It would take another AI to cheat on this AI.